over. And so I do want to record this and be able to share it with people. The Propel grant is due March 1. So we do have plenty of time to be informed and to apply. Before I get into the PowerPoint deck, I'm also going to add a link into the chat. So that is how you apply for the Propel grant. That is phase 1 of the application. And now let me bring up my deck. I have about a dozen slides to explain a little bit about the Propel grant. Feel free to stop me at any time. I want this to be a conversation. So what you see is our title slide, and the Propel grants are run by Federation Innovation. We are a community idea accelerator offering guidance, resources, and connections for our city's Jewish changemakers, from startups to legacy organizations. And what is it that we do? We focus on 3 areas. I mentioned guidance, resources, and connections. We amplify the work of our grantees, marketing and storytelling. We have thousands, if not tens of thousands of contacts. And so our large community can provide some real benefit for some of our smaller organizations or potentially some of the projects of legacy institutions. We provide mentorship and talent development through our GROW work, our subcommittee. And we are all here to learn about our funding. We ignite innovative solutions to challenges in our community, providing micro grants and significant early stage investments to innovative ideas, methods, and products. There are 2 funding opportunities. We have micro grants that are open year round, $500 to $2,000 in funding. If you receive a Bloom micro grant, it's assumed that it's a one and done, that this is meant to prototype an existing idea, and that if you receive the Bloom micro grant, that you are able to bring something to life, and that you would only get it once. You can apply throughout the year, but really today we're talking about the Propel grants. That is early stage significant funding. We define significant as anywhere from $10,000 to $60,000. It is assumed that if you apply to Propel, that you are eligible and even likely to apply for renewal, because again, we're looking for scalable, sustainable, long-lasting impact. We consider a startup to be anywhere from 3 years. If you get 3 years of innovation funding, we are developing the processes to integrate our innovation grantees into allocations so that there is a smooth bridge for long-term impact. So that you aren't necessarily removed from receiving Federation funding at year 4, but that it is a graduation. At a certain point, your innovative idea is no longer new, and so that there should be a process for continuing to receive Federation funding after that point. What is it that we consider to be innovative? It is a new idea. Such as what I mentioned earlier, Atlanta Jewish Music Festival, Jewish kids groups. There are many, many examples of new ideas that we fund. It could be a new home for a national nonprofit, which I'm assuming that there aren't those representatives here today, that the representatives here today are interested in bringing a new idea to the community, or a new programming at an existing nonprofit, which is what Jeremy's here for the Bremen. So new ideas, new homes at a national nonprofit, or new programs at an existing legacy institution. Who should apply? In case that wasn't obvious from the last slide, this is for entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. Some people associate startups and innovation as only for entrepreneurs, but we want to support both of those types of initiatives, both independent innovators and also innovations within legacy institutions. Sharing a lot of information. I want to pause now. Are there any questions on the information that I've shared thus far? Great. So we'll keep it moving. So how do we evaluate these applications? And there are a few different ways that we, or a few different metrics that we use to evaluate our applications. And this is going from left to right in order of importance. Really, the biggest thing is community need. Does Jewish Atlanta need this solution? Are these challenges that you or your peers may be going through? That's really the most important thing. That's 1A. 1B is leadership potential. Not only do we think this is a good idea, do we think that you or your team are the people to make it happen. And those are really the two most important areas of evaluation: community need, leadership potential. It's also important that it is innovative, that it is considered to be a new product, method, or idea. And that we are also looking at the potential business model and the potential sustainability and scalability. So the most important evaluation metrics that we use are community need and leadership potential, but also things that we consider are how innovative it is, how it is defined as innovation, and also things like the business model and the scalability. Really important slide here. So we have the application, we have applied, we have considered why this is eligible for innovation funding, why this is a good fit for the innovation portfolio. What does the process look like? Well, we are now in phase 1. You have the innovation app. The dozens of applications that we receive will be reviewed by myself and members of the CPI team. CPI stands for Community Planning and Impact. And then we will determine which applicants get invited to a second phase. There is a second phase of the application that involves a little bit of a multimedia component. We don't ask all applicants to do this because not all applicants are ready for the second phase. We want to make it easier on the applicants, but also easier on the reviewers. So there is a second phase of application that will happen in the month of March. And then there is a third and final phase. Some of the applicants will be invited to interview, and that'll happen in the spring. Here is a look at those dates. So right now, month of February, we're looking at phase 1, initial application. You have that link in the chat. Phase 2 will need about a week to review the initial applications. Applicants will have 2 weeks to create the video and do a couple other things related to phase 2. We will have some time for our lay leaders and my colleagues to review phase 1 and phase 2 of the applicants that make it through both phases. And then we'll be doing interviews later in the spring. Reminder, our fiscal year is July to June, so we will want to finalize funding decisions by end of spring, early summer, so that our grant agreements are in place at the top of the fiscal year. I'm going to pause now. We're about 2/3 of the way through my deck. Any questions up to this point?
So Russell, this is John Eves. Can you apply to both the Propel and the Bloom simultaneously?
Sure, you could. I think if you are going to do that, you would probably want to do it for 2 different projects, because theoretically one project wouldn't have the same sort of funding needs. So if you did have something that you wanted to prototype really quickly, only needed $1,000, you could apply to both. But I would advise you to make sure that each application is specific for that funding pool.
Okay. And
Great question.
Second quick question. You mentioned your fiscal year is July to June, right?
Correct.
So the funds are dispersed in July for the successful applicants?
Good question. So funds are dispersed 60%, 40%. So when the grant agreement is signed, you get the majority of the funds, a little bit more than half of the funds up front, and then the final grant payment is at the end of the cycle. Some grants are complete before 12 years. So if it's a project-based grant, it could be that your project is done halfway through the year. And so in that case, you can complete your grant reporting requirements and get the second grant payment before the fiscal year is up. But we do split the grant payments 60% at the end, 60% at the beginning and 40% at the end.
Okay, great. Thank you, Russell.
You're welcome.
And Russell, how many grants do you offer?
That is a good question. We really consider the upper ceiling to be amount of money given, not amount of grants given. So we have a specific pool of resources. We fundraise in the community. This is just gives you a little bit of idea of how we work. Federation Innovation is a targeted philanthropy. So Federation is the community's philanthropic champion. We raise about $18 million that we allocate to dozens of community partner organizations annually. The Innovation Fund is a much smaller slice of that pie. The Innovation Fund is closer to about $500,000. And of that, we don't allocate all of it into the Innovation Fund. We have certain areas that we use some of that money for outside of grants, but we allocate the most of it. This year, we spent about $400,000 of grants in our community. We anticipate that number being similar next year. Maybe it goes up a little bit to say $450,000. So if you look at the range of Propel grants of $10,000 to $60,000, and if we're looking at an upper ceiling of 450, we can guess there's going to be 12 to 15 grantees. Maybe if some of the gifts are on the lower range, maybe it's more like 15 to 20 grantees. But we will look at the total number of dollars out more than the total number of grants out.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let me keep it moving. Great questions, y'all. So who are some of the Propel grantees? You can find some information on our website. We do have a current Propel grantees tab where you can, read a paragraph about each of these organizations. But I feel like this gives you an idea of some of the organizations that we support. I do also want to point out, you'll see from these asterisks that some organizations receive innovation funding and then they kind of hit the end of the road and then they don't receive any more continued Federation funding. And other organizations do graduate to what we call the Partners Fund and continue to receive Federation funds beyond innovation. I'm not going to go into all these grantees individually. You'll see in 2021, we have 14 grantees currently. Some of these grantees will apply for renewal, continue to receive innovation funding. Some of them will graduate up to beyond innovation funding, and some of them will not continue to receive funding. And additionally, I want to point out about our current grantees, as that we like to think of grantees in terms of areas in markets, and we can consider these to be in kind of four main areas of impact. Next gen, which we consider to be young adult engagement, human services, health and human services, education and spiritual life, and social justice. So we want work, we want impact in a wide range of the community, but we feel like a lot of our work tends to fall into certain areas of need. Let me back it up one. I want to give you a little bit of history about Federation Innovation. The Innovation Fund was founded in 2012, so we're coming up on 10 years. In the earliest years of the Innovation Fund, we were very much focused on the entrepreneurs. As we built up our capacity, we started working with some of these national nonprofits, establishing some of these local chapters of national nonprofits. And now we really feel like we've got some momentum. We want to be considered an R&D engine for the community. We want to continue having national champions establish a presence here locally. But what we're really seeing as a big opportunity is taking impact in Atlanta, prototypes in Atlanta, and then taking them to the national Jewish conversation. I think it's really incredible what we've accomplished in slightly less than 10 years. If you were around in our early years, you may know that the Innovation Fund capacity was about $50,000, and we were applying for grants $5,000 to $10,000, and that was fantastic for us because it was resources that we didn't have. And so to have been as part of the applicant pool, going for $5,000 to $10,000, and then knowing that we have the ability now to fund organizations of $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, I think is really impressive. And I wanted to take a moment to share a little bit of that history with you. FAQs, this is wrapping it up for me. If I received funding in the past, can I still apply? Yes. There are so many unique situations. So please do reach out to me if you have specific questions. I'm happy to answer them. We talked about how many grants would be awarded. 10 to 12 is a decent guess. It could be 12 to 15. Really won't know until we see what this applicant pool looks like. What should I expect from the interview is that you will be meeting with colleagues and lay leaders. We have a committee we call a think tank. It's about a dozen to 15 lay leaders that will ask you specific questions about your application. Again, this is towards the spring. If you were invited to phase 3 of the process, this will be likely in May when we'll have our interviews. An important point to mention, and I don't know if it's applicable for here, we do have an initiative at a federation called JumpSpark. It is focused on the teen ecosystem. If you are doing work specifically for teens, you know, maybe even preteens as well, because I know JumpSpark does do some work with your 11 and 12-year-olds getting into high school. You would want to apply specifically to JumpSpark. We don't fund the teen ecosystem. We have a special area for people working with teens and their families. Also worth noting, maybe obvious, we support stuff for Jewish Atlanta. If you are representing a national organization, make sure that your grant focuses on the community here. We, as the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta, serve the needs of Jewish Atlanta. I think I mentioned this before, but just to confirm, this is for fiscal year 22. Any grant funding that you may receive would need to be spent between July 1 of this year and June 20 of next year. Last slide is a picture of myself, my contact info, and also my supervisor, Rich Walter. He is the VP of Programs and Grant Making of the CPI team. Again, CPI stands for Community Planning and Impact. So Rich and I are going to be working very closely to review these Propel applications. And it could be that you were on a chain with myself and Rich at some point during this process. So I wanted to make sure that you know about Rich and who he is. I am going to stop sharing. And we do have about 15 minutes left in our meeting. So happy to continue hanging out and answering some questions. If you feel like you've gotten everything that you need, feel free to hop off. This is the end of my presentation. But any questions, comments? Great. Well, I feel like that went well.
Bye,
Did a great job
everybody.
explaining everything, Russ. Thanks.
Thank you, Russell.
Before
Bye.
you leave, thank you all for doing so much for the community. We need innovators, we need entrepreneurs, bring in new energy and new ideas. So thank you, and good luck with the application. I'm here if you need me.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Russell.
That was
Thanks,
awesome.
Russ.
Bye, y'all.
Really
Russell, how are you
Yeah.
going to make it accessible to us, the recorded presentation? More
I can,
specifically, go ahead.
Yeah, I can put it, I'll probably end up putting it on our Facebook page so that people know about it. But if you want me to send you something directly, I can do that, Jada.
Okay, yeah, I just, the slide before the last is the one that I sort of missed.
Okay.
So I would like that information, please, and thank
to.
you. All right, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
Bye, you too.